everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at John Sneisen. And bank run in China. Now I know a lot of our Chinese viewers that love us very much won't be able to see this video because of course YouTube is banned in China for the most part, though with the way things are going on YouTube's been acting a lot more like the Chinese government, so maybe they'll be allowed back in China soon. We'll see. Anyways,
revenue, Josh.
yeah, all these accounts getting taken down. What a nightmare. Anyway, so as this Zero Hedge article says, social unrest breaks out in China after panic bank run on peer-to-peer lenders. And as the article goes into, 1 week ago when discussing the source of China's next debt crisis, namely the recent explosion in Chinese household debt, which over the past year has soared by over 40%, even as credit growth across other debt categories remained relatively stable, and which was on the verge of surpassing the nation's corporations as the biggest source of credit demand, we highlighted the one financial sector that has recently emerged as most at risk in China's economy: online peer-to-peer lenders who collect money from retail investors and dispense small loans to consumers, usually without collateral, putting the loans at risk of a default with zero recovery. We pointed out that outstanding loans on peer-to-peer platforms rose 50% just last year to total renminbi 1.49 trillion, $215 billion, making the size of China's peer-to-peer industry far bigger than in the rest of the world combined. And due to their lack of collateral, interest rates often are as high as 37% with additional charges for late payment. Peer-to-peer, in which platforms gather funds from retail investors and loan the money to small corporate and individual borrowers, promising high returns, started to flourish nearly unregulated in China in 2011. As it peaked in 2015, there were about 3,500 such businesses. But after Beijing launched a campaign several years ago to diffuse debt bubbles and reduce risks in the economy, a campaign which recently reversed once the Trump trade war started getting hot, including the country's enormous non-bank lending sector, cracks began to appear as investors pulled their funds, and you can see this chart here. As a result, the peer-to-peer lending channel not only got clogged up, but went in reverse. In a recent article, the Wall Street Journal reported that a string of Chinese internet lenders have already shut their doors in recent weeks, stranding investors as the economy slows and regulators tighten controls over an unruly side of the fintech sector. Across China, more than 200 internet-based fund managers since late June have either shut down, closed parts of their operations, or are reeling from cash crunches, missing executives, and other problems, according to industry tracker Wang Dai. You can pronounce that if you know how to. The tide began to turn even more forcefully against the sector ahead of a late June deadline for new stringent registration regulations. With a slowing economy making it difficult for some companies to pay back loans, many lenders decided to simply shut down. Meanwhile, investors already soaring on the sector began pulling out funds, further pinching the lending platforms. And as Reuters reports, since June, 243 online lending platforms have gone bust, according to WDZJ.com, a peer-to-peer industry data provider. In that period, the industry saw its first monthly net fund outflows since at least 2014, and we could go a lot deeper into this. It's a long article. It's a boring story unless you know how what this actually means, because this is actually huge when you actually look at the fundamentals, the biggest issues with what is currently going on in China. Because of course there's a push towards that cashless society at the same time as China has one of the most volatile, one of the most dangerous, but one of the toughest, I believe, centralized monetary system, banking systems in the world. A lot of people feel like it's very likely that China will rise up to be the new world reserve currency after the US dollar inevitably goes down.
And that's their wet dream anyways.
And it seems very clear they're trying to get their citizens to buy gold or keep gold, which shows that they're trying to keep the people of their country somewhat more well off and prepared for a monetary crisis. And then they're at the exact same time gathering a lot of gold. We're seeing similar stuff in Russia and Germany and other places. There's a power shift happening, and then at the same time they're attacking cryptocurrencies that are decentralized while pushing their centralized cashless society. And I mean, we've gone into, even in the past, the IMF is talking about putting their headquarters in Beijing. The Bank for International Settlements said a few months back that Canada, China, and Hong Kong are the most at risk of a banking crisis in the world. And, you know, there's, it just adds up. We've done so many stories on this. In my little memory bank here, I got a stack of about 1,000 different factoids that we've said in the past. But anyway, we can't go into everything. John, what do you think about this recent story?
Well, I just think when you borrow money to people, you got to remember it hits what I call the debt saturation point, where there's nobody, no more people to borrow to, and you're running out of people to pay the interest. So it's like a massive Ponzi scheme. And what you saw here, if you look at the two charts here in the article, it shows, you know, the outstanding loans is, you know, hitting about 1.25 trillion yuan. And then you see actual investors investing money is falling off, and these lenders, you know, are really struggling because the investors pulled out their money. They didn't want the money there anymore because they saw how risky the lending was. As I said, with no collateral, it's pretty insane. So of course, it was a stupid idea. Like, you could probably get away with this if you actually know what you're doing, if you do huge due diligence on your customers. But when you don't care about the collateral, and it seems like in China that people are just willing to do whatever it is to make money these days. You know, they're you know, stealing money from the government, running overseas, you know, investing a huge amount of money. Like, look at all the money that Chinese investors are investing all over the world.
In Vancouver, Canada is a big example.
Oh yeah, of course. And there's so many other places around the world where they're going, you know, to Australia, to New Zealand. They're going even to Norway. I know I've heard of. They're going everywhere because what they're doing is they're fleeing out of China because they know that China is a big problem, and of course a massive centralized government. Some of them, you know, stole money. They were corrupt officials from the Communist Party that, you know, ran away with a whole bunch of money as well. So it's just so much corruption. And of course, why is that? Well, it's a communist country, guys. And why would it be a surprise that people are corrupt and stealing money there?
China is a strange mixture of communism and fascism, and as I've gone into in other videos, fascism is basically government control over corporations, and communism is basically government is the corporation, and everyone else is their willing tax slaves, or unwilling in some cases, unfortunately for those that end up carted away and thrown in jail. And I mean, China, when was the last time it was a free place? I don't know. I love a lot of the people there in China. There's a lot of great people. Most of them that I know of that are great people have actually left China and aren't in China anymore. Everything from that one-child policy to what's happening with their facial recognition programs and their technocratic super state, which dates back to the 70s under Henry Kissinger going to meet with Mao and then Zbigniew Brzezinski at the Trilateral Commission. And now with their facial recognition cameras on the streets, which puts people's faces on big billboards if they jaywalk, and then send through facial recognition message to a text message to their phone, an SMS, basically giving them a fine. And I'm just looking at part of this article, and people that are speaking out about this, as it mentions, are like people, there is unrest in the streets, as the article said in the title. There are people that are getting just forced onto buses and carted away to Zhujianghuang. I don't know how to pronounce that. Again, my apologies. Hey, I know how to pronounce some of the names here, but some of them, like, I don't know, guys, crazy pronunciations. But they're talking about some of the protesters just being bussed away. And I mean, where are we seeing that kind of stuff before?
A holding facility for petitioners.
Yeah, sounds like Toronto in, what was that, 2010, 2011. Dan Dix of Press for Truth knows a thing about that. Watch Into the Fire by Press for Truth, by the way. Great film. Anyway, so...
I like they call it a holding camp. Like, that's it's basically a concentration camp where they just, you know, put you there for just to rot, because if you stand up against the government, they don't want anywhere near towards anybody else. So you just get shoved, you know, in the dark hole and forgotten about because, the government doesn't like you.
This is why collectivism is such a disease, folks. Individuals dependent on a centralized entity instead of dependent on themselves, independent that is, and being self-sustainable and actually able to rely on themselves, be financially educated, be financially responsible, be able to actually run their own lives, decentralize, protect their purchasing power, etc. But instead, no, we are constantly reporting on these kinds of stories of people under this vast centralized system being oppressed, and it's happening in every single country in the world that I know of. Maybe not Liberland, our friend Vit Jedlicka and everything, but for the most part, every single country. And all fiat currencies eventually revert to their true value of zero. They always have, they always will, going back to 1024 AD, and wait for it, China. Exactly. And every single time it repeats itself over and over again. It's been 1,000 freaking years, guys. How long are we going to continuously do the whole problem, reaction, solution, Hegelian dialectic mentality? And it's just, there's no sense in it. And, you know, at the same time, if they shove you down a bottomless pit of debt, they force you to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, which puts you into perfect servitude to them exactly where they want you. And folks, what are we doing about it? Oh, well, I don't really understand money. Money's boring. I don't really want to look into it. Well, you better, because if you control your money, you control your life. If money controls you, you have no control. You are a willing slave, a debt slave, and you will reap the consequences.
Yeah, well, if you take a look at the interesting, name of even today's currency, they call it the renminbi or the yuan. Well, go and take a look at Chinese monetary history. It's of course the great Khan. He had the same currency, and he had the biggest empire probably the world has ever seen. Almost
sounds like a Khan.
Well, yeah. And think about that. Why are they calling it the yuan now again? Well, it was the biggest currency in history, but it was also the biggest bust because it fell drastically. They tried to push it into actually interesting plays in the Middle East, and people were burning it because they wanted gold and silver. So it's just an interesting story. But I just want to show you just a clip from my article where I talk about the G30's recent report on shadow banking and show you actually how much debt that China has in total. And in this was in the second quarter of 2015, they had a 290 debt to GDP in total, and that's included the government debt, the non-financial corporate debt, the household debt, and the financial debt. So it just shows you how vast, amount. And of course, Canada is right behind here with 286% together with the United States. So you can just see the mass amounts of debt that we've accumulated. And there's no stop to China. China is gonna, is one of the biggest debt bubbles together with everywhere else in the world now. Everybody's getting into debt because money has been so cheap and it's been available for everybody, and nobody cares about anything. They're just shoving money out into the economy, and now we're gonna finally see a big collapse.
Yeah, and look at this this title right here. This is also from Zero Hedge, by the way. China credit impulse shrinks to 2-year low amid collapsing shadow banking debt. That's just from today as well, or tomorrow, or whenever we get this video up. We try to do it as fast as we can.
Yeah, and if you look here, the non-financial corporate debt is basically the shadow banking, and that is 132% of GDP, just that in itself. So you see that's collapsing. Well, that's a huge part of the actual economy. Which debt, like all these debt, isn't really doing too much to the growth anymore. It's just failing because we're just using it to buy more fake assets, buy more fake money all around the world. It's just a financialization of any fiat currency. We saw that with the Mississippi bubble, back in the day in France, the first financialization of a currency, and of course you see a massive failure with that because you're not trying to create anything of value anymore. You're just making money with money, and there's no need to actually be inventive or create something for value anymore. You just forget about it. You could just make money with money, and that's it, and everybody could just sit on their ass doing nothing with their lives.
And what do we see in the news over and over again today as all this insanity is happening? Oh, well, let's see. There's the Mueller investigation, which seems like it's been going on for an eternity, which nobody cares about. It's a distraction story. We're seeing in Canada the statue of the first prime minister torn down. Everyone's going on about that on both sides. No, that's in Victoria, British Columbia. So, and it's like, who cares? Who cares? It's stupid to want to get this statue torn down. It's also a huge distraction, a waste of time to worry about keeping it up. It doesn't matter. It's not a story. It's a distraction. It's all a distraction, and at the same time, oh, well, what else is new? Oh, well, Justin Bieber's latest romance, and Kim Kardashian has gotten new silicone implants in her butt. I mean, who cares? Nobody cares. This isn't news. This is not news. What we're talking about is news. What we're talking about is something that affects everybody. Real. It's real. It's not fake news. It's real news. It's a fact that people are being extorted. People are being pushed into poverty, pushed into debt slavery. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the the Mueller investigation, and some guy recorded this, and Trump ate some notes in a meeting, and who cares?
Well, and how about, the massive deficit, the continuously increasing deficit, and the massive, increase in government spending in the United States? How about talking about that?
John, we need to focus instead on what Omarosa wrote on some media. It's so incredibly absurd.
Socialists have to say about their midterm election, in the United States. It's just insane, Josh.
Well, we have to also focus on, what is their name? Alexandria Ocasio-Butthead or something like that.
Kind of hinting to. Yeah, exactly. No, it's just insane. Like where we're heading here. It's all like politics. It's like a huge show, and entertainment, where we're just getting like sitting there like zombies, watching this every single day, and we're just getting brainwashed with bullshit that's coming out of the political elite that are trying to manipulate us into believing that everything is fine. But then suddenly, one day, they will be screwed as well, because they cannot continue this manipulation of the economy until a certain point. Look at Venezuela and look at other, countries currently that are really struggling.
But it's psychological warfare in the end, because the media controls the mind, and YouTube has been controlling the mind lately as people are getting their accounts shut down. And, it's an attempt to have complete control over the narrative. And we have a psychological warfare happening at this moment. And we're looking at, well, the bread and circuses have dried up from, football and NFL and, all these big concerts and the Academy Awards and, the film industry and all these different forms of distractions. The gladiator fight, they're gone because people aren't watching the NFL. People aren't watching movies anymore. People aren't watching mainstream media, and they're desperate. So what's a new spectacle? Well, let's get further into politics, which has always been the bread and circuses, but these days even more so, because they're actually not distracting from it. They're distracting towards it and making up stories and causing divide amongst the populace. So people attack each other for having slightly different opinions, different forms of the same religion, of statism or collectivism, and they fight each other instead of the real enemy. And the real enemy is the central bankers, the government, all these centralized authorities and cartels, these organized crime cartels. But of course, let's just talk instead about Kim Kardashian. Folks, let's get on this. Solutions: food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. Of course, gold, silver, truly undervalued, truly sound money. This is something that's gone back millennia. And of course, this is our opinion, not investment or advice or anything like that. This is protecting your purchasing power and being able to prosper in this kind of situation, as we've seen historically. And then, of course, decentralized cryptocurrencies that aren't being completely suppressed, the ones that are being suppressed, because in the end, look at China, the biggest centrally planned cashless society on the planet, with India and Sweden, I guess. And they're the ones that are attacking decentralized cryptocurrencies. That is in the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is what, they're trying to push people into this banking system. If your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's. And if your money's always going through the banking system, through digital transactions, legal tender laws, it's never your money. It's always a bank's, and you are enslaved to the banking system. But then you have these decentralized cryptocurrencies that break outside of that system, are a threat to the financial system. And that is why the biggest cashless systems that are centralized on the planet are constantly attacking them. There are solutions, there are ways, but you as an individual need to control your money and not be controlled by your money and by the money changers and all these people that are centralizing the system to death.
Yeah, it's time to say no to the ninja loans, because that's what we saw here in this article. It was ninja loans like they had in the United States that blew up the whole world economy, just $13 billion worth of it. So yeah, it's the end. And what we need to understand is take charge of your own life, financially educate yourself, and change your life and not be dependent. Number one.
Absolutely. Decentralize everything. Rule yourself. Protect your purchasing power. Be you. Do not bow to any gigantic authoritarian force, because you make the choices in your life. You are the change you wish to see. You are a victim, but don't allow yourself to ponder on that too much, because the more that you consider yourself a victim, the more you become a victim of yourself. Instead, find solutions, break free from the system, and don't allow yourself to succumb to the chains you so revere. Thanks for going into this with us, John. I'm sweating my face off here, so time to go. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth,
be the change.
Like what you see here, OM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized by YouTube as they bring in the ADL to flag all of our content as hate speech. Also check our Bitcoin address in the description as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And also check us out at Steemit at Josh Sigurdson, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post in cryptocurrency, Steem that is. So don't forget to check us out there and find us at Anarchapulco 2019. I know it's early, but this is such an exciting event coming up with Ron Paul, Judge Napolitano, David Icke, Larkin Rose, Jeff Berwick, you know, all the usual characters, and it's going to be amazing. So we hope to see you there. Make sure to check the link for Anarchapulco below and use promo code WHAM to save as much as 15% on your tickets. We hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.